Hello ladies and gentlemen, my name is Dan, the voice behind ThatKaitoDan, and 5 years and 5 volumes ago today, Rooster Teeth's website released to the public the very first episode of RWBY. Since then, we've met a ton of colourful characters, witnessed some incredible fights, and watched as the world of Remnant opened up more and more each episode. So, in celebration of the show's 5th birthday, I went back and watched every episode that's out so far once again, and created a list of my 20 favourite RWBY moments. And boy was it a tough one to nail down to just 20, even when only counting the main episodes, not any of the trailers or the shorts. In the end though, I think I got the perfect list of moments that made me laugh, cry, and smile. Though obviously this means that I need to warn you, spoilers are ahead. But enough grandstanding, let's look back on the show's past before we get to see what comes next in RWBY's future. So, here are my top 20 RWBY moments from volumes 1 to 5. On the surface this may seem like an odd moment to make it into my top 20, but hear me out a second. After Team Juniper formed at the initiation, the focus was largely on Jean and PYRRHA, while Ren and Nora became brief sources of comedy. This meant we didn't get to see much in the way of the group's chemistry until Volume 2, though only in small doses. It wasn't until the dance was drawing near that a scene provided some long overdue attention to the group's friendship, thanks to a little bit of much needed love advice. Personally, I was okay with Jean's crush on Weiss. Some of his attempts to win her affections did leave me with a few laughs, and it was never mean-spirited. But we had to develop this angle at some point for the sake of Jean, Weiss, and PYRRHA, whose crush on the blonde goof was about as obvious as Penny being a robot. Now we got to see Jean depending on his teammates for advice, even calling Ren the brother he never had, which, even with the lack of focus on the group, says enough about how Jean views his new friends. And we also got to see how genuine his feelings for Weiss were, which was really sweet. Plus, you can't help but laugh at the sight of semi-nude Ren just wanting to get dressed, and Nora jumping into a conversation she's not a part of just to clear up another together confusion. But then we have PYRRHA putting aside her feelings to help Jean. Her desire to see him happy was so deep that she'd sacrifice her own happiness to aid Jean's. That's some incredible levels of compassion there, and even Nora, who at that point was solely just seen as the goofball of the group, showed some maturity of her own, realizing the sacrifice that PYRRHA just made, and wished she would follow her own advice. It was a touching scene which wonderfully capped off our first true look at this loyal and caring group of friends that just want the best for each other, and I feel it deserved to be good enough to just make it into my top 20. Headed into the 3rd volume, we knew that we were finally going to see the debut of Weiss's big sister Winter and everyone's soon-to-be favourite drunkle, Crow. And the opening teased some history between the two, so naturally we were all looking forward to their first butting of heads, and thankfully we didn't have to wait too long. It's plain to see right from the moment that Crow tore through some Atlas mechs that these two aren't the biggest fan of each other, even before Ironwood's recent actions, and after some delightful smack talking / flirting depending on who you are, the two clashed blades, and it was awesome. The biggest takeaway from this fight is we got to see experienced huntsmen in action, trading ferocious blows and taking each hit without breaking a sweat, all at a fast pace unmatching any previous fight. It helps showcase the gap between the students and pro huntsmen is quite large, even for skilled fighters like Team RWBY, and they still got a ways to go to match this kind of fighting ability. And it's just such a fun matchup to watch itself, going from quick and agile to destructive and intense all across the academy grounds, complete with a few cool tricks in the pair's arsenal. It may have ended on a big tease once it was made clear that Crow was in full control while goading Winter into losing her composure, but even that didn't dampen the positives to be found. By this point, I think we all could see where Ruby and Weiss got a lot of their personality and fighting prowess from, and hopefully we'll get to see these two ruffle each other's feathers some more in the future. I've always had a soft spot for Velvet ever since we first saw her. She looked like a sweet girl sadly dealing with some grade A douche canoes, so I was super happy to see her become an expanded minor character in later seasons, which meant the possibility of seeing the rabbit girl in combat. However, in her debut fight alongside her coffee teammates, we got major blueballed with her weapon being saved for another time. We just wanted to know what was in the box, but now we had to wait longer. Well, it turns out the wait was definitely worth it. Velvet's moment in the spotlight was a rare bright light during Volume 3's second half of Darkness, but I doubt many of us expected Velvet to kick ass like she did. Her weapon finally revealed to be her camera that can create copies of other people's weapons. And it works hand in hand with her mimicry semblance, so she can use the weapons just as well as the original user, resulting in one element I truly love about this fight: seeing a character elevated to a bigger role because of the fans, using moves that those who have watched the series will spot and remember exactly where they came from. And even if you don't recall every shoutout, you're still getting to see someone who initially was only going to be seen as a timid, abused victim, now wrecking shop on two super tough giant mechs that gave many of the other students a hard time. True, she was overwhelmed in the end, and Weiss's equally awesome first summon landed the final blow, but seeing Velvet finally have her breakout scene was so satisfying. Doubly so with the fantastic tune I May Fall finally making its proper appearance in an episode, for that extra sweet cherry on top. Sometimes it does pay to save the surprise for just that right moment. Well, that last moment was quite positive. Let's see where joy can be found next. Oh, bugger. Yeah, you knew this had to pop up somewhere. While another particular moment might have been the push in the direction of some serious dark times to come, this was the moment that shiitake mushrooms hit the fan, and boy did it leave a mess. First off, the titular PvP battle was some of the best fast-paced combat animation in the series, working off both girls' incredible agility and crazy moveset for one hell of a nail-biting fight. Going into it, most of us probably felt the same stomach in a knot feeling, and the result we all dreaded came true once Emerald got her grubby hallucination powers all over things, resulting in a sad end for everyone's favourite Robo-Girl. Sure, she could be technically rebuilt in the future, but I doubt it's gonna be the same Penny that we've known and loved. And that can't brush aside the tears that were shed and the gaping feeling of loss seeing her mangled pieces all over the floor. But no, the fun doesn't stop there. The rest of the episode just barrels down wave after wave of new troubles once Cinder finally enacts the plan that she's been forming in the background. And speaking of Cinder, she really needed this moment to truly make her a detestable villain in the eyes of the fandom, and the evil scheme that she was creating was long overdue being sprung. The populace are in a state of turmoil. Torchwick is broken out and he's in command of an Atlas ship. The Grimm are swarming the city, and the White Fang are joining in too. It was quite the unending wave of bad, bad, and more bad. But damn if it wasn't a thrill ride in the process. A lot of that comes down to the flawless work done in the soundtrack department. The mix of metallic sounds, techno beats, and the epic choir. Oh my god, the choir singing during the Nevermore's attack is simply phenomenal. Hats off to the music team, as the episode's OST is probably one of my favourite all-time scores in RWBY. Even though this moment is low in the top 20, it shouldn't be seen as a demeaning placement, considering all the other great scenes this one ranks over. It's undoubtedly one of the most heart-pounding sequences of events in the series for any RWBY fan, and the start of something truly iconic definitely deserves due praise. Volume 5 definitely had its faults, but when it had a big moment, I felt they really nailed it. Case in point, the events in the vault with Cinder, Raven and Vernal. Even after Raven and Cinder formed a truce, we all saw a backstabbing coming from either side, since both parties had their own intentions for the relic. Still, it was a tense situation once Cinder got the first move in, freezing Raven in place and launching a gruesome attack on Vernal with her newly revealed Grimarm. That was a surprise all on its own, watching that get finally confirmed, and props again to Amber Lee Connors for her painful screams, as well as Jessica Negri for her confident, victorious preaching. But of course, Cinder's Secret Velvet Crow cosplay wasn't the biggest twist in the scene. I'll admit, I wasn't among those who thought Raven was gonna end up being the real Spring Maiden in hiding. True, there were a few possible clues scattered around, like Raven calling out Cinder's name fitting almost too well as the full Maiden, how Raven was almost always seen with Vernal by her side, and the blink and you'll miss it raising of her hand when that lightning bolt struck her camp. But I didn't feel those hints had any legs to stand on compared to all the clues that we had on Vernal being Spring. She was the one facing Cinder in the opening, she was the one best suited to be the one that ran away from Haven, and even her name, Vernal, was Spring themed. The pieces lined it up too good for me to accept anything else but what was shown to me. So once the ruse was revealed, I was understandably shocked, and yet I loved every minute of it. Cinder's look of joy turning to confusion was incredibly satisfying after how smug she was acting beforehand, and Raven discarding her mask to reveal the twist whilst covered in the mist of broken ice and a furious rage was a jaw-dropping visual to accompany it. But what really nails this scene is, for me, how it does a great job at shifting my point of view to past scenes. That's what I love about mysteries and plot twists. It made me want to look back at past events in a new light, and it threw a massive spanner in the works for how I viewed Raven as a character and all the possible outcomes that I was brewing for the volume's finale. The only reason why it's this low on the list is because the prior theory talk did at least make me aware of the possibility, so the reveal wasn't a complete surprise, but that's no fault of the show's, especially when the reveal will live long in the memory as one of the strongest scenes in Volume 5. The pair of Ren and Nora have always been low-key favourites of mine ever since their debut. While not the most expanded or major of characters, they serve their roles well as charming and badass buddies, as well as the universal supported ship of practically every RWBY fan. But we were craving something more for these two for quite a while, something that is solely about their trials, their emotions, their past. Well, in came Volume 4, and before some nightmarish sights to come back to haunt them, we finally got some spotlight shown on these two, though admittedly more so on the resident mellow ninja than the bubbly ginger snap. Even so, the flashback to Ren's childhood in Kuroyuri was wonderfully structured to deliver not just an insightful look into Ren and Nora's youth, but also to create one of the most gut-wrenching sequences in the entire series. Despite the fact that we knew what was going to happen to them, our time spent with Lai's parents, Anne and Lee, was a fulfilling experience that genuinely made me sad to see such a loving family torn apart, despite only knowing them for about a handful of minutes. A lot of that is because not only were they well-performed characters with honest heart to them, but because we could clearly see where Lai Ren got his notable traits from. His mother providing inspiration to be comforting and warm, while his father taught him about calmness and the need to take action in dire circumstances. This supportive aura from the parents would go on to aid their son in ways far beyond just raising him to be a good person, as it wound up saving his life and the life of Nora, after we finally got to see Ren's semblance, the ability to mask his emotions, the calm balance he needed to take action in such an emotional moment to protect himself and others around him. Simply superb and dramatic character exploration right there. And all the while we got mournful deaths and sacrifices, one of the most haunting grim monsters ever conceived so far in the series, and the gentle birth of one of RWBY's most heartwarming duos. You cannot tell me not to cry when that soft version of Boop was playing as Lai gave Nora her first hammer. This next RWBY moment is the Yang and Raven scene in the vault from Volume 5, otherwise known as the Roast of Raven, cause man did the bandit get a grilling. Even though this is the third scene with these two getting under each other's skin, it's the first real opportunity for Yang to confront her mother's actions, whereas before she was either using Raven to get to RWBY or had a small outburst, but the bigger focus was on other topics. This time, Yang took the opportunity and ran with it, blasting her mother for not just her willingness to let her own daughter get mixed up in a fight just to give her an opening at the relic, but also her general fight or die mentality that has been so destructive for all those affected by Raven's rash and selfish decision making. It's a fascinating scene witnessing Raven's walls crumble at the hands of Yang, making it perfectly clear to her mother that her actions are not a sign of strength, but rather cowardice. Even as the Spring Maiden, the mere prospect of possibly being hunted by Salem scared Raven to her core, and her latest efforts to become stronger would only paint a bigger target on her back. And once that point was made blindingly obvious to Raven, her fear overtakes her, leading her to abandoning the relic and her daughter for a second time to save her own ass. And yet, fear isn't stopping Yang. And after watching how broken she was not too long ago, seeing Yang so brave and so strong, even when she later falls to her knees knowing she's been abandoned again, is such a gratifying sight to behold, especially when it's in tandem with the dismantling of Raven's excuses and false bravado. Now Yang's got a new fire burning inside her, while Raven's gone from the stoic badass to a character with massive flaws and in need of a new direction. And it's all the more interesting now as a character beyond her incredible fights. And of course, I can't talk about the scene without discussing the legendary acting from both Barbara and Anna, who gave the performances of a lifetime with believable emotion behind every line. I said it in my episode review that this was probably the best performed scene in the series so far, and I still stand by that claim. It was two actresses putting everything into the drama, and it worked out incredibly. Man, this one still hurts. Like I said before, PYRRHA'S crush on Jean was quite obvious, and I was among the many who supported the good ship SS ARKOS. I could so see them being a good couple if only Jean realized his partner's true feelings. Sadly, things aren't always gonna end that way, especially when chaos is happening all around you. With a Maiden-powered Cinder about to destroy Beacon Tower and there being no one left to stop her, it shouldn't have come as a surprise that the heroic Miss Nikos would willingly risk her life to protect humanity and the life of her partner. And as we were all realizing PYRRHA was about to make a sacrifice, so too was Jean, leading to a moment 3 volumes in the making. It was the show's first kiss, and with the pair most of us wanted to see share it. We had gone through all the good and bad with these two, the bonding after conflicts, the training, the dancing, and just as these two were starting to become closer, the moment we were all waited for couldn't be fully enjoyed, because for as sweet and deserving as it was, we understood that this would be probably the only time these two share a kiss, and it made for very painful watching. What made this moment even more bittersweet was Jean's pleas for PYRRHA to change her mind even as she sorrowfully forced him away, coupled with one of Miles' best bits of acting selling the heartbroken boy's desperate pleas for anyone to rescue PYRRHA. That launching of his scroll wasn't just frustration that he didn't realize what PYRRHA was doing until it was too late, but it was also the fact that he only just now caught onto PYRRHA's feelings. Yet here he is in the very position that he told PYRRHA back in Volume 1 he didn't want to be in. The lovable idiot stuck on the side while his friends fight for their lives, one of them being someone he cares a lot about, and yet he is powerless to save her. And speaking of PYRRHA'S sacrifice, PYRRHA for the longest time was my favourite character in RWBY, and even though others have leapfrogged her in recent years, I do still love the character a ton. So yeah, her death was a sour pill to swallow, especially on the back of the previous moment. Admittedly, I knew there was no way she could beat Cinder, but that didn't stop me from wishing it, and even with Cinder's new powers, PYRRHA did give her best shot, so safe to say, I was practically glued to every second of the clash. But one arrow to the heel later, and the writing was on the wall, even with RWBY rushing to make the save. Some talk of destiny later, and cue perhaps the most symbolic image of the show. As much as it hurts to look back on, I can't deny it's a masterfully directed scene. The soft serenading tune signaling PYRRHA's final moments tuning out after the arrow struck was a great way to let the emotion of the moment speak for itself, with only PYRRHA's strained final breaths making sound for that added dose of anguish. Then that horribly dark way to go with the golden embers burning PYRRHA away. None of us could see a death like that coming, nor did we expect the shockwaves that it would send out as a result, with the haunting choir vocals slowly fading back in for the sudden reveal of RWBY's silver-eyed power. You may not believe in destiny, but I believe PYRRHA's sacrifice, both visually and emotionally, will forever be a part of this show's legacy, and it deserves its place among this list. Phew, we've had a lot of depressing moments to talk about, so let's lift up the mood with some teamwork and some good old-fashioned grim slaying. For a lot of people, this was the fight that sold them on the show, and it's easy to see why. While the color trailers definitely did their part to attract attention, especially in regards to the combat, this was our first RWBY fight at a far bigger scale. More characters, bigger grim, more close calls, and even more insane sequences. It was like a level up of what we had already seen in the past, and it would become a benchmark for every large-scale fight to come. With several students taking on two giant grim beasties in a wide open space, this meant that Monty & Co. could go further than before with wild moves and a bigger focus on teamwork, since this was gonna lead to the establishment of the show's biggest teams. So we got to see awesome moments like the RWBY girls all firing at once at the incoming Nevermore, the slingshot attack that would set up the final blow, and PYRRHA doing a fastball special with NORA, who was definitely the MVP of this bout with the debut of her Magenhild and her larger than life personality even in dangerous fights. And we could see early on the roles that certain students would soon take, such as Jean and RWBY making calls like leaders should, and PYRRHA and Weiss serving as great support for unique team moves. All of this while the blood-pumping tune of Red Like Roses Part 2 plays in the background, for a truly remarkable fight that just barely misses out on the top 10. Even so, it was a moment that caught the attention of many checking out the show for the first time, and even now, it still serves as a staple of RWBY's terrific action pieces. What's better than seeing RWBY and Juniper fighting two deadly grim? How about watching the two teams fight each other with food? I know I for one wanted to see at least some kind of fight between RWBY and Juniper, maybe like a training session or a class fight, but I never would have guessed it would be in the school cafeteria and with meat and veggies instead of weapons. Couldn't be surprised then when that did happen, and it led to both an excellent way to kick off the new volume and a contender for probably the best food fight in any form of media. There's not really anything too in-depth about the fight itself, save for food-based versions of each character's weapons and some notable attacks, the Matrix-like final move that RWBY pulled off looking proper badass, and a cool little Easter egg for Rooster Teeth fans. Though I did always like that we got more from Ren this time in a fight, since he did leave the previously mentioned bout as the one really having the worst time. At least here, even with leaks in hand against Yang and her turkey mitts, he put up a good fight. Also, I laughed hard when I found out that he was originally going to be using cucumbers, but the crewbie opted out of that when the weapons looked a little, well, phallic. And on the note of funny details, Remember when the Volume 2 trailer dropped and it took out all hints of that food fight to come with this overly dramatic scene of Ruby holding Weiss in her arms? The fandom suddenly freaked out and worried. And I guess that means that Weiss getting impaled in Volume 5 wasn't the first death fake out for the Ice Queen. Still, it was bonkers fun with some very cool moments of absurd action, and overall, it was just a delightful spectacle that welcomed back fans with open arms and mustard stains. Even with Ruby's trips down the dark and depressing, at least we'll always have Melon Hammers sending Yang into orbit. When Blake left the team at the end of Volume 3, it left quite the mark on her friends, most notably of course with Yang. So much so she didn't even want to talk about Blake for quite a while, until it was hard not to talk about her. We all wanted to hear Yang's true feelings on the matter, and now the moment had arrived, and it turned out to become not just one of Volume 5's best scenes, but one of the best scenes in the entire series. This isn't the first time, mind you, that the show has brought up Blake's habit of running away from her problems, but it's the first time that it's a discussion involving just those affected by her actions, and it allows for a new perspective on the topic of abandonment. Yang's heartbroken to be left behind again, with no clue as to why, and while part of her may say that she doesn't care about Blake, it's obvious she does, and she needed Blake's support during her own turmoil. She just can't help but feel frustrated, confused, and hurt over the issue, and being left to pick up the pieces on her own, just like when Raven left, when Summer died, and when Ty was too busy. What really makes the scene work though, alongside the beautiful lighting and angles, is Yang's side of the topic is contrasted and aided by how Weiss has dealt with loneliness in a moment that was long overdue for the pair. Next to Ruby and Blake, the Freezer Burn pair's dynamic has been quite thin compared to the other more developed bonds. But it worked out perfectly that Weiss would be the right person to comfort Yang when she needed it. Someone who can make it clear that just because Blake left the way she did doesn't mean she doesn't have her reasons, and just because Weiss didn't experience Yang's version of loss doesn't mean that she doesn't understand what she's feeling, coupled with some clarity over how much of an asshole Jacques is, and how even when so near, the Schnee family couldn't be more apart. Weiss's words of wisdom is both a fitting way to ease Yang's heightened emotions, and a way to show off just how far Weiss has come, from someone who would only care about her own issues to now openly discussing her tragic life to aid those she cares about. It took some time to get some development for these two as friends, and for Yang to discuss her distant partner, but when it finally happened, I for one was certainly happy in how it was addressed and presented, and how it benefited the growth of two of my favourite characters. Dare anyone challenge the claim that Weiss is the most developed character of the series so far? It was only a few volumes ago that most people did not like her at all, thanks to her bratty attitude and sour moments with her fellow students. But over the years, we've gone to learn more about the Ice Queen and what struggles she's gone through. Now she's more bolder, stronger, and more emotionally stable thanks to her friends and her time away from Atlas. And even her return back home didn't stop Weiss from showing her defiance to her father and others like him, who use their wealth and status as carte blanche to look down on the poor and vulnerable, which led to Weiss's moment of glory in Volume 4 during Jacques' charity event. First off, that beautiful performance from Casey. True, the occasion for Weiss's singing was about as hollow as an Easter egg, but shitty event or not, Weiss's semi-sly cutting down of Jacques was utterly breathtaking. Casey is an absolute gem, and her vocals feel right at home with a powerful ballad like This Life Is Mine. Though the full weight of this song is best found in the full version on the soundtrack, we still get plenty of the message behind the lyrics, before we switch to the after party, and Weiss having to suffer being rudely forced to participate, and then flirted with by a selfish bargain bin Neptune, before one trashy comment later becomes the final straw. Weiss's outburst isn't just fantastic because everything she says is true, but it's the perfect moment to pinpoint just how far Weiss has come. Because do you honestly think the Weiss from Volume 1, who cared little for the fourness, those of a lower status, or anyone but herself would stand up for those same people in such a manner? No way in hell. And it's so good to see Weiss openly confront the toxic environment that she was raised in, even if it did lead to a later spat with her father. Props as well to Kara's voice acting for making sure, for as emotional as this outburst was, Weiss still had that level-headed tone to make each insult feel honest and with purpose, and not just a ramble of frustrations. Our little ice cream has grown so much, and hopefully she's ready for whatever Atlas will throw her way next. But until then, keep singing it, Snow Angel. Hashtag we're coming for you, jackass. It's hard to talk about this scene without talking about the elephant in the room, Monty's passing. Monty's death struck us all hard, and it left the crewbie with quite the challenge to helm his project in his stead. It wouldn't be inaccurate to say that a lot of people were unsure of the fate of the series heading into Volume 3, but I think the crewbie did a remarkable job setting us off on the right note right from the start, with Ruby talking to Summer at her grave. Taking the Monty angle to one side for a moment, I really appreciated what this did for Ruby as a character, as we had yet to see her discuss her mother at all at this point. Recapping her time at Beacon like a casual update between daughter and mother showed how Ruby loves and misses Summer and wishes to let her know that she's doing okay, despite her not being there. Plus, it would later act as a great bookend with Ruby's next trip to the grave towards the end of the volume, with this moment symbolizing the calmer, happier days before the fall of Beacon, and the latter symbolizing the painful moments that had transpired and the change in tone for the series' future. Also, this scene in the visual department is flat out gorgeous, perhaps the most beautiful scene in the old Poser engine. The lighting, the backdrop, and the stunning angles, it's truly something special and a marvelous snapshot of the original engine's best qualities. And of course, there's the added Monty touch to the scene, acting as the crewbie's farewell and thank you message to their dear friend, and a promise to do well by his name. The final shot of Monty's signature, the best way to end one of the most genuine moments for Ruby as a character and the show itself. Monty told us to keep moving forward, and we all did just that, thanks to a warm and beautiful moment to kick off Volume 3 in the right way. We still miss you, Monty, and thank you for everything. Even with the underlying scheming going on in the background, the show for the longest time maintained this vibrant, school-centered adventure feel that, whilst having a handful of emotional moments, still kept things light-hearted. However, once the episode 4 came around in Volume 3, things were starting to change. We got hints that there's more mystery to the world than we expected thanks to the Maiden's discussion. And then we got to see one of the most anticipated matchups in RWBY history. Yang vs Mercury was always destined to be a wonder class of epic action, with the two similar fighting styles and the athletic nature of both combatants. And that certainly was the case once the fist and feet were flying. The movements were sharp and powerful, it all flowed very nicely, and the music added that additional pop to the energetic contest. Now, whether Mercury gave it his all or not is neither here nor there, but he still looked to be on equal footing with Yang, and we knew his group were up to no good. But I doubt many of us expected Yang to come out on top, even if it was just barely. But then we get the stinger. What looked to be a failed attempt to take out Yang slowly twisted into something far more devious. I've seen plenty of reactions where people were confused once Yang was the one getting surrounded by the police, not Mercury. But once the penny drops and the trick has been revealed, it was such a gut punch to our emotions. How did this happen? What's gonna happen to Yang? What else do the bad guys have in store? And why the hell did we have to wait 2 weeks just to get some answers? Damn winter break. Slowly, the wheels of what's to come were turning, and after such a stunning fight and an emotional high of seeing Yang come out on top, the stun look on the faces of all of us watching makes this moment all the more stronger, going from sweet joy to sour pain. Kinda sums up the rest of the volume, huh? I always adored Yang as a character after watching the Yellow trailer. Not only was she full of personality, thanks in large part to Barbara as a voice actress, but her fighting style was incredibly energetic and bombastic, so basically my kind of fighting. And from that point on, Yang continued to light up any battlefield or scene that she was in for me personally. But eventually, every star has to fall, and someone had to be able to beat her in a fight, though who knew it would come from the mute girl based on ice cream. Neo herself became such a strange and intriguing mystery upon her debut, but even after her strange powers aided in the escape of Roman the last time these two crossed paths, we didn't know what to expect from the pint-sized criminal, especially when it's just a one-on-one bout with a firecracker. What followed would be one of the most one-sided fights in the entire series, as Neo ran rings around Yang. Pure athletic ability and mind games versus raw power and rage. It made for quite the 5-star classic, so much so that I just couldn't turn my attention away even with everything else going on at the time. I just wanted to know how on earth Yang could stop this nimble yet charismatic pest, and when Neo finally ended things and gave Yang her first L in convincing fashion, consider me extremely shocked, but just like with some other moments in the series, I was still thoroughly entertained. And then the final twist, with the mysterious masked woman saving Yang at the nick of time, even with such a surprising outcome, I can't say that I was disappointed with the end result. It was a nervy yet explosive way to introduce one of the biggest combat threats that the heroes would face, and it would show weakness in the once seemingly invincible Yang, as well as tease new developments to come once the Raven Avenue came into focus. Never before did the defeat of a good guy leave me this happy. You'd think that the first thing that we would see after being left off on that Yang vs Mercury stinger for 2 weeks would be the immediate continuation of those events. Surprise, surprise, we actually got to see how Cinder first recruited her associates Emerald and Mercury, with a small tease as well of someone ranked higher than Cinder. And while this is much needed insight into Cinder and her 2 lackeys, the moment that stuck out the most to me was the gripping fight against the full maiden, Amber. We knew heading into this battle that it wasn't going to end well for Amber, which is a shame considering she was shown as this generous and thoughtful person, willing to offer food to a crying girl. But lo and behold, that's no little girl, that's a bigger girl, and the confirmation that Emerald is a tricky thief who can cast hallucinations. And we'd also find out that Mercury's legs weren't real, but in fact they were metal prosthetics. Suddenly, the previous setup on Yang was starting to unravel, and props to the crewbie for being able to answer some of our questions on that incident whilst giving us something different to focus on that's still just as captivating. Right away, I have to talk about the music in this scene, cause it's simply perfect. Throughout this incredible fight, the music meshed seamlessly into every wave of action, no matter the pace, mixing in chiller choir vocals and tension-building screeches, with instrumentation hitting just as strong as the many kicks and punches. And even at the slowest points in the fight, the air of suspense was still present. Plus, when Amber kicked into her maiden powers, things got even grander, with one of the best moments of visual and musical blending coming in during Amber's thunderstorm and the frozen leaf attack, to really nail into our heads that this was a power unlike anything we had seen before. Plus, we got to see Cinder at her very best combat-wise. This small but incredible sequence of hand-to-hand combat alone summarizing her agility and ruthlessness to keep the pressure on Amber, who even with the numbers against her, still managed to nearly gain a victory were not for a well-aimed arrow to the back. Even the closing moments had me on the edge of my seat as Cinder tried to drain the power from Amber, only for Crow to save the day. Suddenly, the villains were seen as a legit threat, and the newly introduced maidens instantly became a matter of importance. The powers were out of this world, and so too was this entire fight. We're into the top 3 now, and onto one of the most heartbreaking scenes in the series. As I said before, I was indeed an ARKOS shipper, and I still am in some ways today, though it seems like any moment these two shared that had a tinge of romance to it was never that easy. PYRRHA is trying to wrap her head around everything she's just learned about the Maidens and the mission that Ozpin's group has chosen her for. Not to mention the stress of the vinyl tournament, though that's obviously a less serious matter. Thankfully, Jean is sharp enough to realize that PYRRHA needed to take a breather, and with backup from best wingwoman Nora, the two get a moment of solace together. And it's so soothing despite the earlier troubles, bathed in a warm sunset lighting and gentle music playing in the background. And we get to see the roles reversed with these two, as it's usually PYRRHA showing her supportive side as the backbone of the team, while Jean is the one in need of guidance and a hand on his shoulder. This time it's Jean who has to step up and aid the lost PYRRHA, and he does a solid job considering the fact that he's lacking the context of her woes. Mentioning how his life and his dreams looked the brighter because of PYRRHA's aid was a nice way for the socially awkward lad to tell PYRRHA that he wants to help her out, even if it's just by being there, leading to a moment that made a lot of awes from shippers everywhere. But PYRRHA's fears still lingers, and she does open up on how things have gone far beyond the destiny that she was trying to shape for herself, caught between following her dreams to protect people or following the one thing that she never accounted for, falling in love with someone. And she subtly leaves it to Jean to try and give her a reason to say no and think of her own happiness. Which goes about as well as you'd expect, with Jean's earnest yet out of the loop words that pushed PYRRHA away from him and into the mission that would separate these two forever. When RWBY knows how to hit us fans in the soft spots with an emotional high and low, they make it a critical blow. It was remarkably directed and performed by both voice talents, and it laid the groundwork for even more challenges to come, whilst reflecting very well on this bond that has grown so much over the years. I couldn't picture this scene done any better. The loss of PYRRHA affected everyone who knew her, us viewers included, and her absence still hurts many of the youngsters even up to recent episodes. But even though the scene initially starts with seeing RWBY suffering from some nightmares of watching PYRRHA's final moments, it's all about Jean and his silent yet powerful moment of suffering. The setting itself is worth tons of praise, as the moonlight peeking through the trees and the fireflies flying around RWBY paints a comforting yet vulnerable aura to what's about to be shown, so it fits in very nicely. And this scene is what I always look back on when I see discussion of how RWBY can benefit from scenes being structured on the theme of show, don't tell, an element that many felt has been absent in later episodes. Here though, it's used to perhaps its finest degree, as we never hear a single word from either the watching RWBY or Jean as he trains and listens to the recording of PYRRHA, leaving it all up to us, the viewer, to read their expressions and the mood of the scene to best gauge what's on their minds. The fact that Jean is out here at night training on his own for one thing shows that the guy is trying to make himself stronger despite the loss of his partner, to perhaps best prepare for the next time someone dear to him is in danger. And he is taking great steps in his progress, as seen with the force behind his swings. Compared to how poor he was in the past, you can really tell that he has grown as a fighter, making it all the more painful that the one person who aided him the most is no longer here. And the recorded PYRRHA almost confessing her feelings makes the added punch to Jean's wounded heart all the more crushing. Now it's clear that he knows what she felt, yet he was too blind to see. The harsh reality that, yes, PYRRHA is indeed gone, and Jean is continuously torturing himself trying to make up for where he feels he failed, is quite a heavy moment for the series to show, especially with Jean's expression saying, "I miss you," or "I wish I could have stopped you," or whatever he has to say without him voicing it. I felt every second of his pain, and I'm beyond impressed with how the crewbie was able to portray that in such a manner. It's a moment that I just cannot forget, and thus, it's my second favourite moment from RWBY so far. And my number one favorite moment from RWBY Volume 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 is... It may be cheating since it's a lot of moments in one, but I'm sorry, I can't separate these scenes. They all added up to a single moment that as a RWBY fan, I will always remember because of how it left me broken after it was all done. The final 3 minutes of Volume 3, Episode 11, Heroes and Monsters, where everything just goes to shit. Few shows or works of fiction have legit left me speechless at the end, and I never would have imagined that RWBY would have been able to pull that off too, with moment after moment that knocks our heroes down deeper and deeper into a dark, painful hole. And keep in mind, this is the same episode that finally gave us the highlights of Velvet using her weapon and Weiss making her first summon, the only good moments for our heroes out of this entire episode. The moment that Amber wakes up during the transfer of her power into PYRRHA, only to get shot in the freaking chest by Cinder, is when everything just starts to get awful. What a sad way for Amber to go, and what a perfect symbolic shot to sum up just how we'll all soon feel once Cinder snatched up the full Maiden powers right from under PYRRHA and Ozpin, and things go from bad to worse. We then see Blake get stabbed in the stomach by her warped ex-partner Adam, who wishes to see her suffer by baiting Yang into attacking, only for the Renegade to slice off her arm right in front of Blake, in a visually stunning yet stomach-churning image. If not for a moment of brilliance from Blake, Yang could have ended up dead. Though, admittedly, I always enjoy seeing the reactions of those who only for just a split second legit thought Adam had beheaded Blake. God knows I got fooled by that fake out. After all that, we're left with two of the main girls badly injured and the full Maiden dead. Jean and PYRRHA are escaping the scene, but they're still in the war zone, and a Maiden-powered Cinder is about to take on Ozpin, who seemed to have been a massive enemy to Cinder's leader. Oh, how innocent we were on that angle. And that's a key term to think of for this episode and for this entire sequence. Innocence. Suddenly, the innocent days of food fights, dancing, and time spent at school were a thing of the past, with this entire scene beckoning the darkest shift in the show's tone that would cause our heroes, and those of us watching, to have to mature a little in preparation for some more moments like these to come. If people weren't sure that things were going to change and the narrative was about to take on an adventure far bigger than we first imagined, well, they were sure of that now. Every time I think of the past volumes, this is what I always come to mind first with, because on top of all those elements, even now, the scars of these events shape the current motives and conflicts of all those involved. It's RWBY at its darkest, but it's also RWBY at its boldest, and I cannot rank those last few incredibly momentous minutes anywhere else but as my number one favourite moment in RWBY's first 5 volumes. It was a wild ride and one I never saw coming. But here's to many more highs and lows to come. And that's my list. First off, I want to thank the crewbie and all of those who have been involved with the show, past or present, for the emotional rollercoaster that they brought into my life. This series means the world to me, and I cannot thank those behind it enough for the joy that they have given me, even when it's alongside some tears. You were all fantastic people, and I cannot wait to see what you share with us all next. And for those of you watching, please do share your favourite moments in the comments down below. Let's celebrate RWBY's 5th birthday, and while you do so, please make sure to click the subscribe and bell buttons to get every new video from me as they drop. And follow me on Twitter for more posts on anything RWBY related, updates on future videos, and more. Until next time though, happy birthday RWBY, and have a good day or good night. Peace out.